Welcome to another instalment of Devona Cressa's webinar series. Today we will be discussing urban renewal and transport and how that can ensure the future of central business districts and the office. Our relationship with the office and the workplace has certainly been tested over the past year, and whilst the death of the office has been greatly exaggerated, it's clear that the ongoing pandemic and a shift in expectations of where, when and how we work will influence real estate decision making for months and years to come, calling into question the need for more large business districts when the ones that exist already may not even be used to their full potential. So there's a lot of questions when we talk about urban renewal and the need for office space. And to chew this over, we've assembled a more than qualified panel. We're joined by Claire Cockerton. Claire is Managing Director of Cockerton Co, an advisory agency specialising in providing developers with unique placemaking and strategic innovation strategies. Passionate about technology, you can correct me about that, but passionate about technology, real estate and growth sectors, which has shined through the number of acclaimed projects to her name. As founder and CEO of Plexel, Europe's largest innovation centre, based out of Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. Short distance away from that, you've got Canary Wharf. Claire also helped develop Level 39 and NTIC, producing an accelerator programme and incubator hub for Canary Wharf Group, amongst some of the largest global financial firms. So welcome, Claire.
Thank
Gagan,
you.
Sorry, I cut you off there. Gagan Mohindra MP for South West Hertfordshire, elected in 2019 and appointed in 2020 as Parliamentary Private Secretary at the Department for Transport. Gagan's time in Parliament may be relatively new, but his local politics career stretches back to 2004, with Chair of Planning for his District Council, one of his more recent positions on his CV. Gagan has also worked in the financial services industry in London, as well as his family business. Gagan's current role in the Department of Transport comes at a time when all modes of transport is coming under greater scrutiny, and as we try to recover back from this pandemic. And then last but not least, we have Chris Lewis, Head of Occupier Advisory and Consulting here at Devona Cressa. Chris is responsible for delivering our services to clients. Chris has over 23 years of experience advising businesses of all sizes, from small, medium enterprises through to global corporates. Prior to Devona, Chris was a partner at Deloitte, leading its occupier advisory practice. Bringing together all this experience gives Chris a unique insight into the business challenges that sit alongside real estate decision making. So I do believe that we've got three very good people to be on this panel, so welcome all three of you. So to kick off, I've got one question for you all. So many people have taken the opportunity during the pandemic to reassess their home and working arrangements. Some of them are opting to move out of central locations, with long commutes being one factor that remote working has eradicated. So with this in mind, do you think that this migration from our cities will slow down the pace of urban renewal and also the creation of more business districts in and around our towns and cities? Claire, if I can come to you first.
Sure. Well, I think it's important to note we're still in transition to understand the full impact of the pandemic. So we haven't been really giving permission to come back into the central areas of our cities and come back to our offices. So it's important to know we don't have enough data about how this will impact us on the medium and long term, but certainly people selling their homes and moving is a clear indication that these trends are here to stay, and that our use of offices is dramatically going to change for the medium and long term. So it's my view that this has spurred by technology innovation as well. This has given us permission to work more remotely and to work in places where we might have grown up, or places that provide us greater access to nature or more economical resources. And so I think this will have a long-term impact on where we work and where we choose to live. So I don't think this is the death of this central business district in cities, nor do I think this is the death of innovation districts. I think we're seeing the rise of innovation districts all across the UK now, and smaller cities understanding that they need to develop these communities of technology and innovation and talent in order to build their economic resilience. So that's really exciting. Innovation districts are popping up everywhere with different specializations. And I think we'll always need to come together in the central cities. And London as a city is in my view top of the world. So I don't think we're going to is going to be neglected for too much longer.
I suppose to you, Gagan, on that point, you're an MP in the commuter belt, so a lot of your constituencies will be or will have commuted into central London, and you will probably see as things start to come back that many of those you may have many more constituents as a result of the pandemic. So what are your thoughts on kind of coming back into these central business districts?
Sure, thanks for having me firstly. I'm an optimist by nature. I suppose that's why I'm in politics. Now, I think the pandemic has probably accelerated the drive for adoption of technology. But as Claire was saying, we are, as humans, social animals. I, for one, am sick and tired of virtual meetings. No disrespect to, obviously, this event, but I do think we miss out a lot on not being in the same room with body language and the nuances that you only get with looking at people face to face. I think people were already starting to work from home pre-pandemic. The last 16 months has forced us all to work from home a lot more than we all were anticipating. And when I speak to family and friends, I get reassured that actually a lot of them are eager to go back to the office, maybe not for 5 days a week, but at least part of the week. So from a commercial property perspective, obviously a lot of our pensions are tied up in commercial property, but I do think that the appetite for workplaces outside of home remains very strong. Will that mean that you'll have the odd satellite closer to home? Possibly, but as Claire was saying, London and the large urban areas remain very much a draw, not just for the working environment, but also the social things that it wouldn't be practical in places like Tring or Berkhamsted, or in my place. Things like significant amount of theatre or the leisure stuff that you can only really practically get with large urban areas.
And Chris, I'd like to preempt that you don't think that there was the death of the office, but what are your thoughts on the pace of renewal, and also you've been speaking to a lot of businesses over the past 12 to 15 months. What is on the top of their agenda in terms of coming back to the office and taking that plunge back?
So I think that a couple of observations to come to the crux of the question: will it slow down the pace of renewal, and also will it stop essentially the emergence of new districts? I think it will do the opposite for both. So I think it will speed up the process of renewal in existing CBDs, because CBDs will have to work harder to create a place that people want to work in. And that means amenity, it means building specific and facilities within buildings. You just look at things like bicycle provision, for example. Buildings will have to step up and do things differently. So that will happen within existing CBDs. I think also a real potential unintended consequence of all of this could be that as we see the sort of death of the high street from a retail point of view, we could see the re-emergence of the high street as being a place that actually fits a different aspect of the economy. So it provides workplaces, flexible workplaces within regional towns and villages, almost enabling people to get out of their homes, because a lot of the feedback has been, for those who aren't lucky enough to live in a house where they've got plenty of space for everybody to be together, actually you need a separation. And that separation, people don't necessarily want that to mean they've got to get on the train from Tunbridge Wells up to London. They'd rather just stay in Tunbridge Wells but not be in their house. So show me a space that I can walk into. So I think there's a really interesting evolution for both the existing CBDs, but also the high street, if you like, at a more local level. In terms of, what we're hearing from clients, I mean, as Claire said, there is no final rule book for the future. We're still on this journey of trying to understand what all this really means. And you just have to look at the headlines from 12 months ago compared to the headlines of now. 12 months ago, it was all about what are we going to do with all these offices? No one wants offices anymore. And I'm sure, colleagues of Gagan were probably thinking, oh my goodness, what are we going to do about all these cities and all these landlords and all these people who are calling on their pension funds saying, what on earth are these investments of ours that no one wants anymore? The reality is people have recognized that offices provide a huge opportunity for businesses from an innovation point of view, from a community point of view. The ecosystem that they represent is critically important, and that hasn't got weaker or lessened. I think it's become more of a standout reason why the office, in my view, it is really, really important.
And there's 2 points that I want to pick up on that, the ecosystem. And first to you, Claire. Do you think that these messages that we're already starting to come through from businesses and individuals alike, do you think they're filtering through to developers when they're looking at either renewing an existing business district or starting from scratch?
Yeah, I completely agree with Chris that landowners and central business districts will have to work a lot harder to bring new value to their physical environment, which means creating a services layer to their offering. And I think this is a really exciting opportunity for the real estate industry to embrace technology, embrace innovation, think about how they add value to their tenants beyond building 4 walls and putting some desks in there. So this is really exciting because the real estate industry has run very simplistically for a very long time, and this will drive a huge amount of innovation in what it is that we're offering our tenants, our members, our visitors to these spaces. So I think one of the questions you had asked was about breathing this new life into these existing business districts. And I think there have been some great developers who've thought innovatively about how do I create something beyond the simple generic co-working offering to build a unique community, to give it an identity, to give people a reason to come to otherwise more difficult locations to get to. So the Queen Elizabeth Park and Canary Wharf were those kind of difficult locations to sell. So we had to think about the office from a completely different perspective. What other amenities can we offer? What kind of unique community could we curate? What are the professional services or innovation programs can we run to add value to the businesses that come here? It's a much more sophisticated way of thinking about the business of real estate, and it's a more complex operation. So I think some people have heard the term space as a service, but this I think is going to be driving the innovation in real estate and new developments. And I think developers and landlords will have to think about these things a lot more thoroughly if they want to fill their space quickly and they want to charge attractive rental rates.
And also you need to get people to those locations. And so that kind of brings me to Gagan, where some of the projects that Claire's just mentioned are anchored by extremely good transport systems. So we talk about Queen Elizabeth Park, that is probably one of the most well-connected places in central London. So with your kind of Department of Transport hat on, and kind of the government investment into transport spending, what are the priorities for the government at the moment to be that, to encourage people back into the cities, encourage people back into the towns, and how is your plan for the transport system for the 21st century, the 21st century even, going to come about?
Sure, I think we should just reiterate that obviously we are still in the pandemic, so I would urge people to continue to follow government guidance and rules about whether to go into work. But in terms of the demand transport, obviously a lot of these decisions are well above my pay grade, but it's really interesting to see how much investment we've had in all forms of transport, HS2, Crossrail, the reversal of the beaching programmes. I think part of the levelling up agenda for my government is very much ensuring that actually everyone has access to good and decent and reliable transport, whether that's ideally public transport, but also we've got active travel, which includes encouraging walking and cycling for those short journeys. And this can only be good for us. The amount of investment, I can't quote you a figure off the top of my head, but the significant amount of money we are investing in this Parliament to actually ensure that actually up and down the country people are benefiting from decent infrastructure, for me is a proud moment.
And obviously we've just touched on a few points about London, but obviously there's bigger cities, the bigger cities around the country, and HS2 being quite a key platform that the government is investing in. What other elements? Because obviously there are other towns and cities that might not benefit from that line. Is there anything else that the government can do to try and improve the systems? We're all used to we were quite used to busy trains and not having readily available bus services in local communities. So is this something that the government is committed to in the recovery phase?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of this work was happening pre-pandemic anyway. We've tried to actually adopt a lot more joined-up thinking. One thing we haven't really touched on is, obviously we've spoken about rail, but free ports is a really interesting concept to encourage economic growth in those areas that historically may not have had a real drive. There will be further announcements. I don't want to steal my minister's thunder, but I know there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, so look out for future announcements which will talk about how we are being a bit more strategic in our thinking to ensure that actually we're getting the most bang for our buck as taxpayers. HS2 is obviously a strong domestic policy from my Prime Minister. It may cause me some issues locally to me, but the ability to unlock the economic growth of further north can only be good for us as we move away from the economic engine of the southeast. That's not to say that levelling up should be bringing down the southeast. It's actually bringing everyone else up, and that's what I view it as.
And Chris, has transport been a factor in businesses' decisions on where they locate and also how much space? Because there is talk of hub and spoke, so having that kind of main hub that we've all touched on at some point, and then having that little satellite office. Is this something that is genuinely an interest to tenants?
I think, I mean, obviously connectivity is really, really important, and it will be. I think probably the aligned point is actually the whole kind of return, the glide path back into normality, if you want, coming back into the office. For a lot of people, the barrier is transport. And I think a coherent strategy around what safe transport looks like, and what people's expectations of safe transport should look like, is going to be really, really important. And the messaging about, it's not only good to return to the office, but it's also safe to go on that journey to return to the office. Because right now, I think there are a lot of people who are either genuinely very concerned about sharing in close proximity public transport, or who are able to use that argument as one of the reasons that they would justify not coming back into a kind of office environment. And neither are helpful, either for the economy, but for the businesses they work in, or indeed for their own individual well-being.
Claire, if you have a business location that's in between those commuter hubs, and how can you revive? What do you think is the best way to revive some of those districts that lie kind of a little bit further away from the main transport hubs?
Yeah, I mean, with an innovative mindset and curating the community that you think are actually going to make the journey as well, giving them real reason to come to your space, events, content, services, programs. So I think you've got to think about that magnetism. But remember, I mean, the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park is very connected. Stratford is very connected, but the site here east was about 1 kilometer away from the major transport hub. So we had a kind of last mile issue at here east. And of course, the developer had to invest in a bus to bring people, which is not the best final leg of the journey. But the Olympic Park has experimented with other types of transport, like scooters, installing bird, the walking journey and the pathways are more safe with appropriate lighting and more people around. I think that's very important, that everyone feels safe to walk to work, and that's particularly important for women. I think we have to be really cognizant of the woman's experience in the public realm. So that's very important. And I think we're and obviously installing bike racks and the kind of amenities like showers in your space so that people can transition from transport to workplace effectively. But I think we can we need to start embracing these alternative modes of transport. And I think the tech community is a great one to experiment with, because they're early adopters of all kinds of fun gadgets.
And Gagan, what's the government's position on fun modes of transport?
One of my ministers, Mr. McLean, is leading at the forefront for things like e-scooter trials. But one thing that Claire mentioned just there, which she's actually, I know, working on, which I don't know if it's public or not, but you may have heard it here first, is women in transport. You'll be unsurprised to know that government is concerned about ensuring that public transport remains safe for all users. One of the silver linings around the pandemic has shifted behaviour. So the rush to coming to work during rush hour has meant that actually the trains and public transport aren't as busy. I commuted into Westminster today, for instance, both on train and tube, and yes, it was busy, but in more normal times, pre-pandemic, those both modes of forms of transport would have been really, really busy. So going back to Chris's point about confidence, once we are in a position to get people to go back to work, I'm sure we'll have messaging to bring people back onto those forms of transport, because from a DFT perspective, we want to, yes, not be anti-car, but we want to encourage people to use public transport rather than their personal vehicles, because practically we don't have enough infrastructure in place to have everyone driving into work. The roads will be clogged up. We need people to get back onto the trains and the buses and the tube. So I think a lot of this is watch this space. Obviously, a lot of London is covered by TfL, which is under the London Mayor, but we will continue to work closely with them.
And you mentioned about TfL in London, and Manchester are consolidating theirs under a similar TfL structure. Is it likely that we start to see more regional bodies come through to tackle kind of the combined element of transport systems?
So I believe in localism. So my personal view is actually yes, but I think the direction of travel needs to be where you are doing things well. You may take on more responsibility. Where you're not, government normally is the default position. I think it'll be really interesting to see some of the ideas. Government can't do everything on its own. We do need MLTs and local councils to be engaged and supportive. Yes, we do have deeper pockets than those regional bodies, but some of the levers of power, I would suggest, are probably stronger at the regional level rather than national.
And switching tack a little bit, so we've talked about the actual property element, the transport element. What about the actual businesses who are locating in our cities? So we've been very successful at creating innovation hubs in and around the country, and obviously this will be a key driver for a recovering country and economy. Claire, if I can come to you and say, well, we have been successful. How can we continue to be successful and not just replicate the same things that we've done pre-pandemic, or do we need to replicate?
Yeah, a great question. I think this is a multi-point answer, but point number one is
got all day.
is I wish we did is industrial specialization. So I think specialization of cities is very, very important. When you're marketing an innovation district, you cannot be everything to everyone. So we need to look around. What are the local assets? What are the local resources that we can use to create a particular magnetic identity? So what are the research hubs working on? What are the universities doing? Is there a particular industrial focus or strength? And so I think one needs to analyze that and build on that when we're creating new innovation clusters. And that then forms the basis of what you can use as the character to attract new investment and new businesses into your space. I think we've been good at creating talent pools and multidisciplinary talent pools. So what I really appreciate about the UK is that we do have these clusters that bring designers together with business people, together with engineers, and we're getting better and better at this kind of multidisciplinary collaboration in these innovation districts. So that's critically important. And then I think three, for me, it's about, well, I think there's 4 points, but number three is really about product innovation. So as we say, I think tenants are moving away from wanting an office 100% of the time for 100% of their staff at any one time. And they'll want more bite-sized micro offerings where they can access space for particular types of activities like meetings, collaboration, learning and development. And I think if you are a landlord, you need to think a little bit more about how am I packaging access to my space. And ultimately, I think that has positive financial ramifications on your business model, but it makes the operations more complex. So for example, one office, split it into two, provide it to two different tenants. So on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you have one particular business coming in and using that space, which reduces their monthly cost of paying for the entire space for 100% of the time. And then Thursday, Friday, you might have another company coming in, again, reducing their overall monthly cost, but ultimately bringing in greater revenue from an office square foot perspective for the landlord. So I think we have to think differently about how we're packaging these spaces and offer more pay-as-you-go, micro offerings, easy to access types of products. And I think the fourth bit is really about in building innovation districts is focusing on how are we contributing to the entrepreneurial spirit and the entrepreneurial journey, and how are we contributing to employability, so skill development and professional development, because we know that the pandemic has dramatically impacted young people's ability to find work, to build the professional skills. And so I think if we had programs and services to support the entrepreneurial journey and support the development of employability skills like resilience, problem solving, communication, leadership, etc., that's incredibly important for creating these very attractive innovation districts, which creates a really positive cycle of business growth, job creation, and attracting investment into these spaces.
There's two elements that your last 2 points, not disregarding your first two, but your last 2 points, Chris, I want to segue into you in terms of the type of offering that young businesses or even kind of established businesses, what kind of offering is out there in terms of securing office space, because flexibility has come through over the past couple of years as being key. And from Devono, we've seen that the range of space out there is greater than we've seen before. So if you could just touch on what is the offering for businesses?
Yeah, I mean, historically, I mean probably only a few years ago, so not great history, but anyway, the offering was either a serviced office that you took in a flexible space where you just signed up on a monthly or maybe 6 monthly basis to a number of desks, or a landlord solution. And then dotted around, there may have been some subleases and things being offered by tenants that were relatively flexible. As things have gone on, and particularly kind of fueled by COVID, the whole model has kind of just changed dramatically, such that the amount of space and the amount of choice that's on the market now is quite extraordinary. You know, we've still got those traditional bookends, if you like, but what you've got is this kind of blurring in the middle, where you've got landlords who are also trying to provide the flexible, and you've got the flexible guys trying to provide something that feels a bit more long term, because frankly, some of them are just long on space now because of this sort of COVID scenario. And then dotted around it, you've still got tenants dropping in spaces that they no longer need. Now, some of that is space they haven't needed for a while. Others, it's entirely as a reaction to what we're going through at the moment. So there is a chance that that space will be whipped out again when those tenants realise that actually they do need space and they do need to bring people back together again, and they withdraw that space. The net result is, though, if you're a business looking for offices at the moment, and this isn't just a London issue, this is across the country, there's probably never been more choice and opportunity to kind of take something that is appropriate for you right now. And for the reasons that we talked about right at the very beginning of this discussion, you know, we are not at the end of this kind of process, and so people are still learning what this means for them. So it's right that if you're of a certain size and you're able to be agile, then you take something that gets you through these next months and couple of years perhaps, but doesn't bind you to something that ultimately you regret, because inherently leases are not massively flexible. You know, you sign up for a period of time and that's you. So having that flexibility is really important. I think landlords have recognised that, hence altering their model. And yeah, it's a good time for businesses to be looking at space.
So if we take the theme of this discussion, which is about urban renewal and the office, so we've got the drive from developers, we've got the offering of space. We just need the businesses to commit. So therefore, in a recovering economy, Gagan, if I can come to you, the government's got a lot of work to do to try and kind of bring about a swift recovery and invest in employment and future skills. Could you touch on a few elements, even if it's just down to your local area?
So, Sean, you've hit the nail on the head there. You know, we've gone through a global pandemic, which is once a century, and yes, we've done really well on the vaccine program, but as we transition out to normality, we need to get people back to work and being revenue generators and taxpayers. Chris used the term ecosystem, and that, from a policy perspective, is what government should be doing. We should be creating an environment for those businesses and people who wish to succeed to actually do so and not be a barrier to growth. You know, I'm a Conservative for that reason. So I do think that the executive and everything I've heard suggests that will be the case. Now, what that means in individual policy, I don't know. But I'm sure that there'll be cleverer minds than mine working away in Westminster and Whitehall, thinking about that very challenge, that how do we make the most of coming out of this so that it is a V-shaped recovery rather than a bit elongated.
And with that in mind, can you, but this is a question for all three of you, in 5 words, I'll probably allow 10, but can you describe how you see the future of our cities? And I'm going to come to Chris first.
I would just use 2 words. I would say complex, but I'd also say exciting. I think this, like all these great challenges, they represent moments, and it's how you respond to those moments. I think this is incredibly exciting, but I don't underestimate the challenge at a kind of national level for Gagan and his colleagues, trying to work out how on earth you create policy to deal with this kind of thing, but also for those people who are in charge of local districts and those people who own buildings. You know, everybody has a challenge, but it should be seen as an exciting one.
Claire?
So I think I'd start with social progress. We've talked a lot about the pandemic and what's happened over the last year to real estate. But there's also been some really exciting social movements that have happened over the last year and a half, and a new social awareness around really critical issues like the Black Lives Matter movement, safety for women, mental health. And so I think cities are places where we can come together to help solve some of these social inequalities and think about ways we can be more inclusive and more diverse. And my second point would be about entrepreneurship. And I think entrepreneurs are the heroes of our time. So I think cities that can think more entrepreneurial, seeking opportunities to differentiate, to innovate, to have competitive advantage over other global cities, that's very important for our cities. And then I would say the green agenda and climate change. Our cities need to adopt new technologies, and government needs to set policies to create a much more green and climate sensitive environment, because cities are under pressure because of climate change. And then I guess another point I'd make is about the sharing economies, and how I think cities enable the sharing economies to flourish, which creates better accessibility to more people. So sharing our houses for shorter periods of time, sharing transport, sharing business services, sharing talent. And I think that is the great attraction of cities, because we can easily share resources with one another without having to invest heavily in owning things. So that shift economically is very exciting and will happen in cities.
Thank you. Gagan?
So I'm going to copy Chris on this one. For me, this is an exciting time. I think disruption does have some positives sometimes, and I think we are at that phase where those who are entrepreneurial and ambitious will actually be the winners. Claire's point about it's a global competition. We're not competing north or south or urban to rural. And it's, for me as a policymaker, it's creating the environment that says to people that, if you want to try something, failure is not a bad thing, give it a go. We are really reliant on SMEs from a government perspective. So the more that people have the confidence to try things out and be the future global multinationals, that employs people, health and well-being wise, people are happier when they're in work, they're less of a burden on the tax system. So I remain an optimist. We have a really strong heritage of entrepreneurial spirit in this country, and part of what Boris as Prime Minister, I think, offers is the confidence for people to say, things are looking up, glass half full mentality.
There's a few words that are coming out from what you've said. So there's entrepreneurial innovation and opportunity. So it seems as though we are at, albeit we're still in a pandemic, we are at a point in time where we've got opportunities and opportunities to build on something that we'd already started. So whether it's existing urban renewal, whether it's existing business districts, but definitely it seems as though we have whilst it's a long road ahead, it looks quite optimistic and a rosy one. So at this point, I'd just like to thank Claire, Gagan, and Chris for your time, and yeah, let's come back in a few months' time to see how things are fared. Thank you very much.
Sean. Thank you.
Thank you.